Hi, welcome to Detours Understanding Acquired Brain Injury. And today we welcome back Jenny. And you've met her before, and we're continuing with her and her section on domestic violence and traumatic brain injury, a very serious topic. But we're gonna be just discussing things for the layperson and things to be aware of, just so we know what we're looking for. Jenny, if you introduce yourself again, just like we'll just get started.
Hi, I'm Jenny. Um, I've been a victim of domestic violence through my life, and I have also been in a car accident and have acquired a brain injury. Um, I wanted to talk today about the way that a lay person, so not a doctor or a nurse, just general Joe Blow on the street, may be able to recognise somebody with a brain injury. The first might be able to recognise someone with a brain injury caused by domestic violence. Domestic violence is something that I have suffered through my life, and I know that the cumulative effects on the hits on my brain and my head have certainly not helped my brain injury now. So I'll start with just the 4 basic signs of a brain injury. So you start generally with a concussive with persistent headaches. Now, I myself suffer from migraines, ocular migraines, and another type of migraine, which I can't remember the name of, but I'm sure Mark will remember.
You and I have discussed craniocervical headaches as well as the clusters.
The clusters and the craniocervical, that's the ones. So the craniocervicals are the muscles in my head, and the clusters seem to be the amount that I get. Mine can last from 3 days up to 2 weeks, and I am totally debilitated when I have them. I can't see, I vomit, I can't really look after my children. They are extremely hard for us. Another thing that somebody with a TBI may have is amnesia and confusion. I don't always remember how they were injured. Some of them, it's quite easy to persuade a person with a TBI that they were injured in a totally different way than they actually were, which is something that is used by a gaslighter, which we will talk about later in the piece. Nausea, vomiting, fatigue, and vision issues are also part of a TBI. A lot of these can be easily diagnosed as Alzheimer's or dementia. So getting the 3 things separated is really important.
Now, this applies to any kind of concussion or any kind of head injury. So it's important then to recognize other signs that go with it. But yes, any kind of concussive hit to the head, basically, which is a shaking of the brain inside the skull. So it doesn't even have to involve a physical hit, just any kind of shaking of the brain. And like vomiting, I just want to stress that it does not have to involve a hit.
And they're cumulative as well. It just doesn't have to be one. It can be 50 small hits. It can be 10 slams into the wall. You know, it doesn't have to be a blackout. You don't have to get the tunnel vision. You can just have your brain shaking.
Right.
So domestic violence, as we know, is not just for women. It's not just a women's issue. It's also very prevalent in the GLBTQ community, and men are also subjects of domestic violence, particularly disabled men. The statistics for disabled men are the same as women. in domestic violence.
Mhm.
When you're looking for domestic violence, if you suspect domestic violence in a colleague or a friend or an acquaintance, the first things to look for are unusual marks. Often people will try to cover these marks with makeup, not always successfully. They're
Mhm.
often places that you would find very hard to hit, like the inside of the underneath of your arm. It's not a place that you'd hit often. You might hit the outside of your arm or your shoulder, but
So
this
you're
place,
saying, sorry, I apologize for interrupting, but it's like what you mean is that it would be hard for you to strike, if by accident. For you mean
yes,
places that you would find hard to bump.
that's right. So if I was outside in the garden, I would be more likely to run into a fence with the outside of my arm
Right.
than do something to this inner underside of my arm. Another place where bruises often occur are around the collarbone, and that is often because of hypoxia, where somebody's tried to strangle you, basically. Bruising, they try to keep the bruising low so that it's not visible. However, it does come out and it is there. And hypoxia is lack of oxygen to the brain. And this, of course, is a huge cause of brain injury.
Mhm.
Ribs and back. Unless I fell backwards, I can't bruise my own back or
Right.
ribs. And often people who are abused are slammed into things like
Mhm.
walls and doors and door frames. And a mark down the middle of your back would be very, very hard to do to yourself. It really
Right.
would. The other things that you could look out for is the inability to make decisions without consulting the other person.
Yeah.
People start to become very afraid of upsetting the partner. So you might say, hey, would you like to come out for a drink after work? And
Mhm.
they can't do that. They have to ring and check home first. And very
Or
often they won't
text.
come.
So they're like attached to the phone and always have to like be checking in. That's something to be
Checking
alert
in.
for. If they're always texting or communicating with their partner all the time for everything,
Yep.
that's a red flag.
They are often really concerned about time. So the time they leave work to the time they get home, or how long it takes to run an errand. They start to worry about all those little things, and it becomes down to minutes where they know that somebody's watching and waiting for them to come home. And why have they been so long? And why, and why, and why. And that is the beginning of having to explain yourself. And as soon as you start having to explain yourself, you're stepping into dangerous ground.
Oh,
Um,
then that's also a warning ahead of time. If you're with somebody who really is going to monitor your times and stuff, get out. Get out now.
absolutely.
If you've got to
Absolutely.
like down to the minute, get out now. If they're not able to
Absolutely.
flexible, and if they seem like very aggressive with you over stuff like that, monitoring who your people are or stuff like that, get out now. That's dangerous. That is a red flag. I did EMS for a long time. I worked emergency. Get out
Absolutely.
immediately. And the second they lay a hand on you, you got to
Leave
report that right away
first.
and get out.
Don't wait for a second. Leave the first time.
And a single
It
strike is
does
enough
not
to do brain
matter.
damage. A single hit is enough to do brain injury. Just
Correct.
mentioning it.
Often the perpetrator will gaslight the victim. And gaslighting is a quick manipulation by psychological means to make you doubt your own sanity. Thus, others start to doubt your own sanity.
Yeah.
And eventually you start to doubt your own sanity. You start to say, well, it must be me.
Yeah.
I actually ended up with hearing aids from a domestically abusive partner who used to do this. He would say, oh, Jenny, I'm talking to you. And I'd be like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. He said, and he would say, you always can't hear me. You need to go and get your hearing tested. It's you're deaf. And eventually he convinced me that I was deaf. And I went and I got hearing aids. Now I'm not deaf. I don't need hearing aids. But his constant berating and gaslighting, like talking really quietly and then talking really loudly at me, I doubted my own sanity. I didn't know what
And people with
was
brain
going on.
injury are really susceptible to this. And this is important to know. And if you've taken a blow to the head recently, you're not noticing, hey, wait a minute, I can hear the cars go by outside, I can hear the clock, I can hear other sounds just fine. And other people at work or other friends, or when I talk on the phone or whatever else, I can hear them fine. And you don't have the ability to logic it out. And you're already anxious with this person, you don't trust them, you're on unstable ground. And so entertaining this idea, yeah, it would seem to make sense. So if you're friends or if you're family with, the situation, it's like, watching out for this kind of behavior. And this is exactly kind of gaslighting manipulation. The other one is to make you doubt your sanity. They'll tell you one story, I'll tell you another story, and then they'll say, well, gee, no, you don't remember that right.
Yeah, you got that wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's it's your. And the thing is, it's like, again, with brain injury, maybe you're right. Not trusting your own. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind. Some people who are abusive do have their own brain injury. It's not an excuse. Remember what I always say. Disability is an explanation. It is not an excuse. Because then really, if they have these problems and are aggressive and can't control themselves, they probably shouldn't be in a relationship anyway. Now, I'm not one to, pass laws or anything like that, but if you know you've got a problem with rage and aggression, you need help, and you shouldn't be like messing around with other people. And if you don't have the ability to judge whether or not, then unfortunately the courts end up doing it for you. If you're not going to seek help.
Now,
so that's the reality of it. And some abusers had the crap beaten out of them when they were kids, repeated head injuries, and they don't even have the self-appraisal. I want to talk about that when we get into functional neuroimaging and neuroethics, as to what we do with people who don't have empathy because of brain injury, or who have reduced empathy, reduced compassion because of brain injury. There are ethical implications, what we should, as a society, do with them. But in any case, if you're a victim, domestic violence victim, this can affect your own senses of empathy. You may find you're more aggressive with your own kids, stuff like that, because you can't control your anger and rage because of brain injury. So this does have deeper implications. You may find yourself smacking your own kids around because you're angry and can't control. So again, it's not saying, this is destiny or anything, but it is important to get out if you're able. And many can't very easily because they have kids, or because they're professionals, or because well-off people or professionals, or people who are afraid for their status, women who are, and men. What I said about medical professionals, and they're very high rates of abuse, being victims of abuse. It's a complicated issue.
Yes, often wealthy people will not disclose abuse, loss of place, loss of that societal norm. They don't want that. They want to live their normal, happy, rich, wealthy life. They don't want to destroy that by saying, actually, he hits me, he hurts me.
And they won't be believed in many cases. Where do they go? Where do they go? And then people say, oh, well, you're so-and-so, you're executive of a company, you're a lawyer, a doctor, a judge. And how come you didn't see this? That's not how it works.
No, it's not. And so often you hear that. How come? How come you didn't leave? How come we didn't see it? How come? How come? The how come is such a hard question to answer. And I can't answer it here because it will take another whole series,
They
another
don't have
whole
abusers don't have
podcast.
abuser written on their head. However, there are some early red flags. Again, they start demanding to know your time. They'll love bomb you at first. They will cover you in, all kinds of, yeah. This is the red flag.
Flowers, gifts, take you out, wine you, dine you. They will, and then they've got you.
That's the
And
red flag
suddenly
of a
you're
narcissist.
reliant.
That is the red flag of a narcissist. Somebody who, you're the only person in the universe for me, kind of stuff. And yes, you'll hear that in good relationships too, but it changes quickly.
It
They
does.
cannot make, and they're emotionally unstable. Again, many of them have a brain dysfunction. We'll hopefully talk about that later at some point, but it's the instabilities that are the red flags, and it's hard for you to get out because you feel good, because you have a brain
Very,
too.
very hard. I have 4 children. Can tell you how hard it was to get out. It took every single ounce of my soul, my heart, my head, my money. I had a plan and I had to work that plan to get out of there.
And we
I
do want to
was
talk
nearly
about that in the
killed.
next episode. Mm.
I was nearly killed. My ex-partner picked me up and threw me 12 feet down a hallway into a corner and kept picking me up and throwing me back into the corner. Now, I can tell you that then I could feel my brain vibrating. My ears were ringing, my eyes were blurry. I couldn't even stand. He didn't knock me out. He just kept slamming me into that corner.
That
And
is severe concussion. That's severe. That is on the hard end of, you don't have to black out.
no, you do not have to black out. You do not even have to get the tunnel vision of blacking out.
Just
Remember that
hits.
all hits are cumulative.
And,
All
and
hits are cumulative. Whether I tomorrow hit my head on the branch of a tree, that adds to my brain injury.
yes.
Another
And
thing that I found myself doing was I would constantly say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I can't. I'm sorry I didn't. I'm sorry I'm sorry. And that was, I had nothing to be sorry for, but I was trying to placate him and keep him calm. The other thing, the final thing that I think you may find from domestic violence victims is that the explanations of the injuries they have become quite convoluted. The way I hurt the inside of my arm, the way I bruised my sternum becomes a story rather than a simple, oh, I hit it on the doorknob. They feel the need to over explain their injuries. I know this because I've done it myself. I had a cut across my chest from here to here. It was done by a fingernail. And I explained that as a trip to a friend, and I tripped over and I fell into a blackberry bush and I did this and I did that. And no, I hadn't. I'd been hurt. I'd been pushed, I'd been cut, and I'd been slammed into a wall. And I didn't want to tell anybody.
Right.
I was embarrassed. I did not know what to do. Finally, I was able to leave. Very luckily, my brain injury is not as bad as some others. I do struggle with words. You'll notice that I also lose my train of thought sometimes. I'm down below. At the end, I shall put some phone numbers for Australia for people who are experiencing domestic violence or may feel like they need to talk to somebody else. And maybe they think they're friends, you know, these are the people to go to.
I'll put American ones down there too.
Yep.
Ones from the United States.
And we have in Australia a very special thing that was set up where you type the word Daisy into your computer so that you cannot get caught Googling domestic violence, because I can tell you it will not end well if you're caught doing that. And it will bring up all domestic violence services available in your area. I'll list that with the phone numbers I have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm quite happy to talk about my story. Myself and my 4 children are safe and we live a beautiful life now. And I thank Mark for giving me the opportunity to, you know, be able to help other people in the same situation.
I'm going to add a little bit more, if that's all right, because I think there are some things I do want to. A lot of hits are to the head or choking, shaking, because it's not as easily detectable, and you may not see wounds or hits to the body where like turtlenecks and other high. So lots of that. Lots of isolating, like from workmates if they have jobs, or lots of absences for recovery, sunglasses indoors. It's not, some people say, oh, well, that's their drinking or whatever. Not necessarily. And some of the symptoms you would associate with alcoholism or a hoarse voice, they would say, oh, from yelling a lot. Not necessarily. Choking will cause hoarseness. Choking is the number one symptom of, you know, it's like, because and choking and lack of oxygen, hypoxia. 38% of domestic violence involves choking somebody. Strangulation, 38%. And symptoms of choking, like hypoxic brain injury, executive deficits and memory deficits. So much of the confusion, stuff like that, possibly is from hypoxic injury to the hippocampus. And executive deficits, planning, thinking, organizing, problems paying attention, focus. And the thing is, these kind of deficits feed into abuse, because if you've got these kind of symptoms, you know, anger, the abuser, and something else, not always a male abuser, can be female or family abuse. You know, it can be like mom on kid, can be kid on parent, elder abuse too. And we do want to talk about that later. If you land in the hospital or doctor's office, if you're going to ask, make sure you ask when they're alone. Nobody. It might be the abuser's mother. So if it's a woman with them, or the abuser's, you know, a friend or something who took them to the hospital, ask alone. Make sure there's nobody with the person if you're going to ask them. Nobody, just that person. And they still may be reluctant to disclose, even if you've been friends for a long time, because it's still something that is upsetting. Why don't they go to a shelter? Depending on their situation, the shelter may not take kids, or it may be in a really bad part of town that, you know, because so many of these shelters are set up with the assumption that you're in a broken, rundown apartment or like something like that. Most aren't. And so they're reticent to go to a place. They're afraid they may get their stuff stolen. They may be, or they're afraid they may be assaulted, you know, things like that. So, you know, it's like they do good attitude, but they're not taking into account certain factors. Also, brain injury, judgment is impaired, stuff like that. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. If I had gone to a shelter, I have 2 girls and 2 boys. My boys couldn't have come. That is just the way shelters work. They own the way the shelters work is that they only take women and boys under 5. I would have had to send my boys somewhere else
What do you do
alone.
with a 7-year-old? I don't think a 7-year-old's out there working a 9 to 5. Um,
No,
and
no,
this is a problem. And so the attitude of the shelters denies women the support they need. Um, Again, it's this assumption that only women are abused, and that is just patently false. And so, what does a man do
right.
who's abused? What does a disabled man do? What does a gay couple do where one man is abusing another? Where do they go?
There is nowhere.
This is a social problem, and it is a problem not of gender. It is a problem of power and control.
Yes,
This is a
yes,
human problem, and it is time it be addressed as a human problem, a problem of, no, in some cases, it's a problem of people with brain injury who have problems controlling their aggression. It is a problem of narcissism, personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. Again, with the understanding that those who are mentally ill, majority of those who have mental illness are victims of abuse, but there is still that small slice that have behavioral problems that makes them act out against others, that make them lack empathy and compassion, where they see people as objects for control, see people as a way to show their prowess because they are weak inside or defective. Again, this rolls into neuroethics and what we shall do as a society. For now, we can only lock them up. Maybe someday we'll be able to literally reprogram their brains, change who they are, maybe erase all their memories, start again, or put implants in their brains. But for now, all we can do is lock them up. But it's like this need to understand that it is more complicated than that. I don't think I have any video where I haven't said it's more complicated than that. But that
that
being
should be your
said,
catchphrase.
yeah, it should. That being said, we need to respect profoundly the victims of abuse, the survivors of abuse, regardless of their situation, whether they are female or male, whether they have children or not, whether they have male or female children, whether they have brain injury or not, whether they are well off or not, whether they're in a good neighborhood or not, whether they've been choked, hit, strangled, whether they're using substances, and that's something else. Many people who have been abused, many women who've been abused, men, start to drink to deal with their problem. They start to use drugs to anesthetize the pain. They need help. And so it's like that understanding is so important. Um, mm. Anything you wish to add? I just wanted to throw those in too. I felt like they needed to be put in there too.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we've covered a fairly wide range there. But please, if you do suspect that somebody is being hurt, speak up. But do it be careful. Don't put them in more danger.
What would you recommend to somebody who's like, no, 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 don't want to talk about that? Is there anything like you would recommend? So if somebody's like too afraid to talk about it, any like last minute like advice?
You can't make somebody talk. However, you can be their friend because they will be friendless or nearly friendless. So engaging them just in general conversation, eventually they will come around and they will tell you eventually. But it's so hard to trust anybody that it just takes time and effort on your part.
Now, if you see obvious bruising, things like that, you can report it. It may even cost you a friendship. It may cost you, communications with family members or whatever. But you have to, there's an ethics question. And again, you've got to decide what is worth what to you. And again, you're not going to see a lot of this bruising. You may see like a lot of turtlenecks, a lot of makeup or sunglasses inside, stuff like that. And you've got to decide, what is what. And guys definitely will not talk about this. I know, personally, I'm not going to get like too deep into it, but personally, having been on the receiving end of, yeah, like I said, I'm not going to get too deep, but I do know, having been on a receiving end of, yeah, some abuse myself. Yeah, that guys don't disclose. Um,
They
yeah,
disclose even less than women.
yeah. And it's been a long, long time, shortly after my brain injury. And because your own judgment, and people who've had a brain injury, their self-esteem is crappy, and they get into situations where,
And the judgment is impaired.
and so they may go in with people who they think are good for them, who turn out to be bad for them. Fortunately, I did get out fairly quickly. And men, it's assumed, are, like, um, yeah, that, they should see this, they shouldn't, it's like, why would you let this happen? It's not a matter of letting it happen. It's a matter of not maybe having the best judgment and allowing yourself to be pushed around because you feel like shit. Your own worth is non-existent. Um, and so you figure you deserve it. That's another issue too.
They beat you down.
Yeah. Yeah. A combination of psych and physical, and you're kind of
Absolutely.
messed in the head. Your own judgments are poor.
Yeah.
All right.
They
Well,
are.
gee, leaving on that happy note. Yeah. Oh, public service announcement from Australia.
Public service announcement. If you see an animal and it is not where you expect it to be, please leave it alone. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like a lot of creatures on the beach or whatever else. If they're not entangled because of human activities, if they're not beached like a whale, if it's like, say, a snake, maybe they're giving birth. Like some of the sea snakes and other critters that people figure, oh, I'm going to rescue these. Don't do that.
I'm going to rescue that.
Right. We were
Don't.
discussing this earlier. It's like, if a 1,000-foot tall giant came along and you were giving birth in the hospital, you wouldn't like it to crack open and go, I think this thing belongs in Africa, dropped you in the middle of the savannah while you're doing that. You kick, bite, spit, and pee on it and hiss at them too, I expect. So please, like, when it comes to wildlife, don't try to rescue them unless it's human activities that have caused the problem. And if
We're in spring here in Australia, and there are many, many animals are not in the place where they would normally be because they are, birthing young and laying eggs. Just leave them alone.
especially
Be
Australian
smart.
animals, they seem to be better armed than even the ones here in America. Here in the States, they just tend to be really big and they'll just knock you around. But in Australia, they'll envenomate you. Yeah, they'll poison you or, envenomate you. So yeah, just leave the critters alone. All right, that's enough Steve Irwin for well, an anti-Steve Irwin message, I guess. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time and generosity in teaching about a very serious subject. Any, plans for what you want to do for your next one you've been thinking?
Yes, I have. I think that we will talk some more about the the whats and wheres, the hows and ifs. They aren't concrete things, and we will somehow work out how to talk about them because we need to get as much out there about domestic violence and brain injury as we can.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so let's just do a really fast recap before we close this, just so it sticks in people's heads before we go. Symptoms of both. Like for concussion, you're looking for persistent headaches. So a person's complaining of persistent headache, nausea, vomiting, especially projectile vomiting over a period of time. That is definitely a flag. Dizziness, confusion, and it's like vision issues, discoordination, onset, maybe even trouble speaking. And you do not need to take a direct blow to the head. You don't need to have any bruising, wounding, just a good like shake of the brain. That is MTBI, mild traumatic brain injury. And mild does not mean symptoms or prognosis. Mild just means the rating on the Glasgow Coma Scale. Okay, so it can be very severe and long-term persistent post-concussive syndrome. So you know that 10 to 15% of people have permanent brain injury from a so-called mild TBI. We'll talk about that later. Okay, and domestic violence signs.
Domestic violence signs. That on the phone, where they're constantly checking in, they're constantly, and they're withdrawing from more and more social situations, as well as marks and bruising. It's that constant feeling of having to explain where they've been, the constant worry about time and how long something's going to take, because they know someone's watching.
Okay, and like, you know, it's like also hoarse voice, or like the eyes may look like they have pink eye or something like that. I mean, choke, that's not alcohol, you know, for choking, and other like unusual bruises, things they cannot explain, defensiveness, some things that just, and if your gut tells you something isn't wrong, you know, maybe gentle questioning. If you feel creeped out around their partner too, your gut instincts are worth something. Okay, your gut instincts, if they tell you something isn't right about this person, not just that you don't like them, but your intuition says something ain't right about this person, about who they're with. They're like always hovering. They won't let you talk to them alone. Strange kind of stuff like that. If they're aggressive and hostile towards you for not for anything you said, just like don't like if they try to break up friendships and stuff like that. Again, these are all kind of hints. There's something ain't right. All right. So I just want to say, like, thank you so much. I appreciate everything. Please like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon below. Any comments, questions, thoughts, anything for Jenny, please below. Thank you very much, and we'll see you around. Our time is almost up here. As I see according to the clock, we've got less than 30 seconds. So again, please like, subscribe, any suggestions, let us know. Thanks very much, and we'll see you again. Bye.
Bye.